Very good morning to all of you. A warm welcome to Bengaluru Tech Summit 2020. It's my privilege to be with you all and with good friends on the panel who have done phenomenal work in the space of agriculture, agtech, and dedicated a lot of time and effort in working for the welfare of the farmers. It is my immense pleasure to be moderating this panel on doubling farmers' income around the FPO model. I am Anil Kumar G, founder and CEO of Samunnati, a agri value chain enabler. The topic that we have taken up for the panel discussion is so important and critical for all of us. And it is heartening to note that government of Karnataka, as always, is taking lead in this initiative as well. On behalf of the entire panel, I welcome you all to this very relevant discussion, and we hope this discussion will give lot many ideas for us to pursue this important dimension of doubling farmers' income with FPO as our universal focus. Thank you for joining us. We all know that we have the issue of fragmented land holding, majority of our farmers being smallholder farmers. Adoption of technology is a challenge in that context, so on and so forth. We all are aware of the challenges that we as a country have specific to bringing interventions around the aggregated deployment in the farming. And the best part or the silver lining is the growth and the proliferation of the farmer producer organizations on the principle of cooperation, wherein each one of us as FPOs exist for the collective growth and collective benefit, taking roots in addressing these challenges that I mentioned. Because FPOs aim at aggregating primary producers to generate economies of scale, both on the input side as well as on the output side, while improving the market linkages or access to larger markets, as well as when possible or when they are good to bring in the processing capabilities. The other wonderful development that all of us are also witnessing is the emergence of a number of innovative startups in the ag space. And many of these startups are focusing on relevant aspects of technology which can pave way to adding value both to the farming as well as the farmers who are the actors in this space. We have seen a huge potential for technological innovations and startups to support agriculture in India to help overcome a number of challenges related to sustainable land use, productivity, cost of cultivation, gap, market linkages, so on and so forth. And we are also seeing a lot of traction in terms of private equity or private capital flowing in to support and encourage this emergence of startups in the agtech space. Right? So in the context of this panel, while deliberating on the topic that I have mentioned, we will basically look at discussing three dimensions. One, how can we take smart and sustainable innovations to the FPOs to scale, as well as increase the productivity and income levels of the farmers, is one dimension that we will discuss. The second dimension is how can FPOs and farmer collectives realize the importance and benefits of the agtech innovations and hence look at adapting to these changes while looking at doubling their income. And the last dimension that we would be seeing, or the third dimension that we would be seeing, is the need for integrators to make both these constituents, the FPOs as well as the startups, coming together and work together in tandem for the collective benefit. So on this note, I would like to take the conversation ahead and introduce our panelists. Glad to have great friends, wonderful human beings, and people who have done phenomenal work in the space of agriculture to be part of the panel discussion. I warmly welcome Hemendra Mathur, co-founder of ThinkAg, venture partner with Bharat Innovation Fund, and chairman of the task force of FICCI on agri startups. While this is the formal introduction of Hemendra, Hemendra is also known to be the father of Indian agtech startups and is an inspiration for many of us who have been witnessing the youngsters taking up the startup route in agriculture. Thank you for taking out time, Hemendra, and a warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Anil. Thanks very much.
Then we have Ashok Kumar Meda, founder and CEO, Innovative Technology Services, co-founder, Krishi Kalpa Foundation. Ashok is one of those who has the benefits of both the world and has spent significant amount of time in the trenches, as they say, before moving into playing the role of the integrator that Krishi Kalpa Foundation aims to be. And Ashok is an inspiration for many of us who have spent significant time in the corporate world and then looking at our second innings in doing something meaningful to leave our legacy. Warm welcome to you, Ashok, again, and thank you for your time. Now I have the privilege of welcoming good friend, fellow ICICI Bank alumni, so to say, Kishore Jha, founder and CEO Ergos. Kishore has taken up this immense challenge of not only the geography where he is operating in Samastipur in Bihar, but also on an important dimension of post-harvest intervention in providing warehousing services to smallholder farmers. And he would be talking to us on his journey and inspire us on how you can take larger challenges in smaller bites. Thank you again, Kishore. A warm welcome to you and thank you for taking out time. And now I would invite youngster, one among you in terms of the agtech startups who are there listening to this, Sandeep Kondaji, founder and CEO, Krishi Tantra. Good to see and encouraging to see a youngster, a professional taking over an important aspect of soil testing and bringing technology to make land use more productive. Incubator of Deshpande Foundation and a startup that has just been in the news for right reasons, for attracting private equity into this important aspect. So a warm welcome to you, Sandeep. Thank you for taking out. So on this note, maybe we get into the panel discussion without taking too much time. Of course, as is the customary with many of the panel discussions, which many of you are familiar by now, we will first take 1 or 2 minutes of each of the panelists on two dimensions. One, talk a little bit about their work and also a little about how are they looking at the topic for the panel discussion. And after that is done, we will have a round robin league of specific questions to the panelists. And then last but not the least, we will also see if we can engage among the panelists on few of the questions on based on what we have discussed. So on that note, in the same order as the introductions, I would request rather Hemendra to talk a little bit about what he does and more importantly talk about his views on the topic. And Hemendra, if I may be permitted, I will straight away ask the question as well so that we can be efficient with the time. Once you have introduced your views on the topic for the panel, what are some of the innovative interventions and technologies of startups that are enabling the FPOs, both in the pre-harvest and post-harvest, is the question to you, and it would be great for us to hear you on this. Thank you, Hemendra. Over to you.
Thank you, Anil, for a warm introduction and setting the context. What I do in one line, bring technology to agriculture. I'm strongly of the view that if we have to change agriculture in India, there has to be a lot of entrepreneurial energy which can do it. Of course, we need policy, we need infrastructure, we need other enabling support. But to me, the biggest driver of growth for agriculture in India is going to be entrepreneurial energy, and I'm blessed to have an army of entrepreneurs who work with me. So I think that's the mission I work on. On the topic, yes, doubling farmer income through FPOs. Clearly, I think we should be very ambitious in increasing farmer income. Whether we double it, triple it is secondary. But I think there has to be a constant endeavor to increase it. And I think we are witnessing a very interesting change in India. First, the food demand is going up. We are going to move from a $500 billion food economy to a $1 trillion food economy. So clearly, demand side looks to be robust. Plus, if we add the export demand, which is coming up, it is cherry on the cake, right? Second is, of course, the tech revolution that we have seen in last 5 to 7 years. I think that's coinciding with the evolvement of FPO ecosystem. I think both tech startups and FPOs are pretty much symbiotic relationship, and if both of them can work together, I see it's a win-win situation. Specifically to a question on the kind of interventions, I see interventions on both post-harvest side and pre-harvest side, which are possible to achieve this goal. Post-harvest side interventions are very clear. I call it more like a farm level value addition through storage, through cold chain interventions, through primary processing like sorting, grading, packaging. I think that value addition, which typically is happening at MSME level, if we can bring it closer to the farm, it will help farmers earn a lot of income, right? And this essentially means, the models like Ergos have, models like Earth Foods have, models like S4S Technologies, which is essentially empowering the farmer to do this processing at the farm gate. And with FPOs, it becomes even more viable because you're not just talking single farmer, you're talking maybe 500 to 1,000 to 2,000 farmers, right? So if they come together, the ability to set up this facility, ability to make sure that the facility is utilized, I think goes up significantly, right? But an important dimension is also that all of this has to be demand driven. We just can't create infrastructure with the hope that we will be able to sell. And I think that's where the role of tech startup comes up, who not just create this facility, but make sure that whatever being stored, processed, gets sold in the market. So I think that's on the post-harvest side. There could be other elements also like quality assaying and diversification of farm income, by helping FPOs to get into ancillary activities like livestock, like sericulture, like poultry. That could another dimension which we can touch upon. And the second intervention is pre-harvest or the production interventions, and likes of what Krishi Tantra is doing, for example, measuring soil nutrition, right? There are a lot of startups who have built interesting models, figuring out what kind of inputs are needed, in what proportion, and which essentially optimizes the use of inputs, right? So if I am using 5 bags of urea, I may end up using 3 bags of urea per hectare, right? Because I know what the soil needs. Likewise, you can optimize the use of water for irrigation. You can predict pest attacks well in advance, and protect the potential crop loss which can happen on farm. So I have seen at least 15 to 30% increase in farm income by just optimizing the cost of inputs, right? And the last part is, of course, financing. How do we bring the cost of capital down? I always say most farmers, most crops have a healthy EBITDA, but the interest cost sucks up all the profitability, and farmer is left with very little or very thin bottom line, if at all. So, and I think the kind of work you are doing, Anil, through Samunati, I think is a great example. How do we build access of institutional credit to farmers through FPOs? And hopefully, by partnership with other financial institutions, mainstream banks, bring the cost of capital down so that the net income goes up for farmer. So I'll stop here. These are 2 or 3 interventions which I believe can go a long way in improving farmer income.
Brilliant. Very, very valid thoughts as always, Hemendra. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. We will come back to you soon. So we'll move to Ashok now. Ashok may have to unmute himself. So Ashok, a little bit about your foundation, and the question to you would be, what is the potential for the most often spoken about public-private partnership in creating the enabling ecosystem for doubling farmers' income?
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಅನಿಲ್ ಅವರೇ. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನವನಾಗಿ ಕನ್ನಡದ ಶುರು ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ. ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಕನ್ನಡ ರಾಜ್ಯೋತ್ಸವ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ.
ಹೌದು ಹೌದು.
And this great forum, I'll switch on to English because there could be a kind of lot of cross country, cross states, hearing of this audio record. It's a great event, Bangalore Summit, Technology Summit. In fact, I've been in the core group last maybe 20 years back when Vivek Kulkarni brought this. We used to meet in the palace grounds. And that was when I was heading the bankers committee, the SNBC here in Karnataka, where priority sector credit was the theme which was tabled in every forum of this kind. And good to come back here after a couple of years. I see the kind of passion I have to touch base with the grassroots agriculture and see what could be the best. Thanks for your setting the theme. And Hemendra, as always, he puts the core aspects in the, in the entire gamut of things we want to discuss today. It's so great that DFI is the, kind of thematic discussion we have and how it addresses the farming community as FPOs. I think the entire, and it's very coincidental that Ashok Dalwai, who hails from Karnataka, was the Empower Committee chairman. In fact, a couple of things which he keeps exchanging are worth discussing here, which should come across the kind of value adds we should take. I think the DFI is one thing which targeted the farmers than anything else. Like, do we think of white revolution, green revolution, or whatever, blue revolution, or whatever? Here, it's a revolution for getting income. I think this was lost for quite a while by the kind of the policymakers or the people who are implementing. In last 4 decades of banking, I have done to the grassroots, maybe the rural or corporate segment. The issue was, do we translate the kind of innovations we bring in terms of doubling or getting it back to the farming community? And what's the kind of income structure of the farmer? Like, is it the farm income or is it the non-farm income? In any standards, it's like farming income, it could be a 60%, whereas the next 40% the income for the farm family is from the non-farm sector. I think I'm audible. And other aspect which, when I come back to the PPP mode, which you suggested, let us understand what's happening at the grassroots level. You rightly said it's a fragmented value chain and also small farmers getting in through. I think the agri value chain, if you start recognizing the value chain aspect, like I was abroad doing with McKinsey and the kind of African enterprises there. Value chain systems works very well. Like it should not be the various stakeholders across the value chain should be connected mutually. I think this is where the PPP will actually function. Like, are you going to totally depend on the government for everything? Or every stakeholders playing his role across the value chain, connect to each other, bring in the kind of access to market, maybe the input supply or the other one, like outputs. And in terms of the productivity, yes, can we add value to the kind of, India is having the kind of production volumes, but when you go to the individual farming, the productivity aspects ring a lot, where the productivity enhancement with the limited resources he has gets the revenues. I think that's where the PPP should come in. And then, as Hemendra was telling, like, can there be a value addition at the farmer's hands, like or a community of FPOs which gather together? There's a possibility that scaling is not possible for one small farmer. Can it be aggregated? But here there's a matter of awareness where the private participants can come in. Like we have the techies, we have the financial, like even in this forum, don't you see the convergence happening? Like the convergence happens out of the PPPs. Like now we have 3 bankers here and 2 techies coming together, and we are speaking on behalf of the farmers. This kind of convergence will happen by the PPPs. Like the finance, the technology, the kind of entrepreneurial abilities, and these aspects will actually converge here. And conversion is the key thing which should come in here. And other thing is the premise of the entire DFI. The fulcrum equation is what's the input and what's the remuneration he gets, and does he meet the costing? And the primary pillars, like, is it productivity gains? Like Hemendra said, can you reduce the cost efficiency? And most importantly, monetization of the various services like logistics, warehousing, like which other stakeholder, other participant in the panel will tell. Is sold to a kind of a farming community or a farmer. Is it adaptable? Is it customized to his requirements? Ease of operations is possible. This is whatever policy, and what's the kind of ecosystem aspects will come in. I think these are the, is acting like a platform here, where if an investor comes in, say, suppose we pilot is the Karnataka, we have the one from the banking, one for the FPO side, one from the farming, agri. So this convergence of one platform will make a single window approach for the investors coming in our technology interventions which can happen. That's the platform we're trying. And stakeholders across the agri value chain has been really fantastic. We'll create some role models in Karnataka and spread ourselves across the country. So these are the few words I just wanted to share with you. Thanks, Anilji.
Thank you, Ashok. Very, very relevant points coming from a person who has worked in the trenches. So we move to Kishore. Kishore, from a corporate banker to an entrepreneur, you have an interesting journey, interesting story, and an inspiration for many youngsters. Can you talk a little bit about Ergos? But more importantly, the question to you is, Ergos has been one of the first few to look at smaller warehouses in multiple places. What was the thinking while taking this kind of an approach, which was not the norm, not what others were looking at? Can you please unmute and share your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, sir. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. And it's a nice forum that I will be able to share my thoughts and experience and learnings and how we look forward to actually, try to touch base as much as possible the geographies across the country. So, what I learned for last 8.5 years, that there are many ways to have a significant or the powerful intervention in the rural ecosystem, where the more than 50% of employable workforce are actually seeking agriculture as their employment. So I think I decided to choose a post-harvest. So why post-harvest? Basically, the number one reason that if the farmer is getting a more income, if their wallet share is higher, they will learn how to spend it, right? Even it applies to you and me also. If you have a bonus, a lakh rupee in your pocket, you don't need to learn from someone that how to spend it. So that is where my intervention was, and I could learn these things from my childhood when my family and the neighbors were struggling to resolve the post-harvest challenges, because the farmer who cultivate a crop for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, and when the harvesting happens, they are helpless. They are running here and there. They are dependent on a ratia broker and all that, and they are somehow thinking about just getting rid of the produce what they have put a lots of effort to complete the process. So there I came up with the idea that there is a word called grain bank. So grain bank is something I decided that let the farmer treat their grain as a currency, and that currency can be converted into a digital inventory into their wallet, the mobile app, or a physical the grain bank khata book. So khata book, it's as good as the bank passbook. The farmer can have also the grain khata book, but it's not so easy. It sounds very easier, but when you go to the ground level and when you face the challenge, like India is a country of marginal farmer, not even a small and large. Now we call it like marginal farmer country, where the farmer produces hardly 20-30 bags. If I talk about produce like maize, wheat, and paddy, the problem what I realized that if I assets or the digital inventory, there has to be an infrastructure close to the farm gate, and the farmer cannot go to the 100-200 kilometer away from their village level to access institutional services of storage and all the financial the supports, because I realized that all the warehousing services in the country are available in upcountry locations, either in a close to the delivery exchange delivery center, or maybe the largely on the the demand side. So demand side, all the infrastructure were getting organized, but nothing was happening on the supply side. So there the intervention was required, but there was certain condition that I cannot go and set up a 20,000 metric ton warehouse in a village. Then again, the problem will be because the farmer is fragmented, and they put 10 bag, 20 bag, 30 bag. If you start coming to a warehouse of 10,000 metric ton, you will take 6 months to fill. The farmer has to travel again 20 kilometer, 30 kilometer. Then only you will be able to fill. So idea was very simple. We have to come up with a very micro grain bank, micro warehouse storage kind of solution, which will have a capacity to accommodate not more than maximum 500 to 1,000 or 2,000 metric ton, where the farmer can easily come from 2 kilometer, 3 kilometer on their own traditional logistics arrangement like bullock cart or tractors and all this stuff. For that, they don't need to go and hire a big the trucks and all that. So that's the idea. We realized that I cannot develop the warehouse because as a startup, you have to think about that how to leverage the existing infrastructure. And I came to know that there are thousands and thousands of warehouses been constructed by the government initiatives. Lots of landlords, the farmer themselves, they have constructed these warehouses in the village, and those warehouses were lying idle. So we started identifying those warehouses. Those databases are available on public domain. Anyone can go and search WDRA and NABARD website. You will get a list of warehouses in Karnataka, Maharashtra, everywhere. So we started approaching them and started engaging those warehouses on lease. That's called long-term lease. Long-term lease, it will help you to bring down your cost. Because the cost is the next challenge. Because if you are going to customize solution, as Ashok sir said, that there has to be a customization of the solution, considering your customer is a marginal farmer. They will have a lesser paying ability. They will have a small transaction requirement, and they will also have a less adaptability of the technology. So you have to run a platform offline to online. So you cannot bring a world-class technology. You can run those technology at the back end, but the front end, you have to make sure that the farmer should not feel sometime that, if I'm putting grain here, whether I will be able to withdraw it, whether I will be able to sell it, or whether I will get a good price. So then it all starts offline platform, and then slowly you convert into the digital platform where you need a lots of support at ground level. And there the lots of role come for the FPOs. The FPOs really can play a great role to collect the farmers, to bring the farmer together, give them lots of hand-holding, the training, demonstration, and trust-building exercise. Because the grain is just next to their farm gate, and they can see, they can come and they can feel the grain just next to their door, and they can use the platform. But for that, we need a lots of collective effort. And in that process, we need a lots of support, lots of initiative from the FPOs to mobilize the farmer, to build the trust, and then only they will be able to use the facility. So the model is very simple, that we need to set up a grain bank, a small warehouse in the village. That warehouse will be catering to 550 to 200 farmers in the vicinity. Those farmers store maize, wheat, paddy. These are the three commodity which we learn how to manage their, the small scale size, the preservation techniques. Then we connected the food processor also in the vicinity, because you don't need to go to the again large buyer, because the large buyer will not give you attention for 500 ton what you are setting at ground zero. The large buyer says, sir, okay, tell me 10,000 metric ton, 15,000 metric ton, 100 metric ton, 100,000 metric ton. So we have to customize solution again. So Ashok sir ke language mein, the customization has to be at the back end, at the front end also. And also on all your, the channel partner, like you have to go to the financial institution like Samunati, Ananya, Grameen Impact. So these entire supply chain has to be customized, not in a one direction. Even the technology need to be customized. The farmer will not jump on the technology platform and the mobile app. They will never get fascinated about all these latest tech innovation. They need a physical touch. They need someone who can really, on one phone call away, they can go and visit and explain them something. All the hisab bari and khata, they should feel it that yes, this is my grain, this is my currency. It is with me. Anytime I can withdraw, cash or bag, number of bags and all that. So these all hand holding need to be executed at ground level. And ground level, FPO intervention, the PPP model also, when you scale, when you going all across the job, also to build infrastructure. Luckily, all the government policy which is coming up, it is all, favoring to that. The entrepreneur like Sandeep, and I think investor like Hemendra sir will definitely get excited about the kind of the traction, what I can see at ground level. People are getting really excited. I can see only the $265 billion worth of grain. These wheat, maize, paddy, if you talk about, and these intervention can simply increase 30-35% income of the farmer. Doubling farmer income can be achieved, I think, within 1.5 years. That's the only learning I would say, and that's how it actually excited me to intervene. And I can see the the change. I can see the commercial, the gain to the farmer pocket, and I can calculate it everything, because my technology platform helped me to demonstrate that ability that yes, I have increased your income from 1 lakh to 1,30,000. And then once they build trust in your capability, helping them to increase their income, now you go back and tell him, sir, you need some kind of insurance, you need some kind of further credit assistance, you need to do a soil testing, and I will guide you what crop to be, sowing to be done. Because the trust is the first level which can be established basis helping them in their crisis. And that crisis is basically a post-harvest, and that actually excited me. And we are in a process of replicating this grain bank across the country. We are operating 70 grain bank, 42,000 farmers. But journey will be very challenging and very interesting. Everything changes at ground zero so rapidly that you can't imagine. The technology penetration and adaptation by the farmer will be actually a big challenge. But provided if we all put a collective effort, bring FPOs, bring lots of local stakeholders and lots of startups come together and build capacity at ground zero. So the farmer adaptability of technology currently at 10 to 12%, honestly speaking, it can go up to 60-70% over the next 5, 6, 7 years. That's how I can see, and I'm sure the farmer will start learning it slowly, but we need to put a collective effort, sir. Over to you, sir.
Super. Thank you, Kishore, for that energetic, disposition of what you think and what you believe. And it's wonderful to see that what you have seen as a problem during your childhood is what you are looking at solving as an entrepreneur. More power to you, and more such people, let them come into the agriculture. Now let's move to the new kid on the block, Sandeep. And time and again, Kishore mentioned that adoption of technology by smallholder farmers is not going to be easy. But I really love the way he put two things together. It's challenging but interesting. So there is a positivism to the challenge. So Sandeep, let's clear you out in terms of what Krishi Tantra is looking at doing. And while we have seen many innovations in the post-harvest, innovations in the pre-harvest technologies, farm extension services are emerging. Can you please explain how you are going to make soil health testing solution affordable and applicable to farmers or FPOs to enhance their productivity? And more importantly, answer Kishore's question of how are you planning to make farmers become tech savvy, adopt your technology? Over to you, Sandeep.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity, and also it's a great privilege and great feeling because I have been growing in this agri-tech sector, listening and seeing to you all people on the other side always on the panel discussions and on various forums. and that is what has actually influenced my thought process and be here. And it's a great feeling that I am sharing the dais with you all eminent people who have done, and I hope that I will take this legacy forward and hand over to the coming generations who will be there. So it's a great feeling. Thank you for this. Thank you for this. So now coming to whether farmers are going to become tech savvy or not is a different subject. So now that is not even our objective. So our objective is not to make farmers tech savvy. Our objective is to make farmer realize the benefit from the technology, and the technology has to be built and bought onto the ground, not in the direction of teaching them and training them on technology. It has to be adaptable, and there has to be an immediate realization of that benefit. Now soil is a very key thing, which is a key component. Now if you take, the most triggering point for me to get into this industry is especially on the soil testing and diagnosis. One of the statistical information that I came across in Karnataka especially. So one of the example I will quote, which is also there rest of the world and also the country. Out of 94 lakh hectares, now more than 30 lakh of hectares is not used for cultivation because of the soil degradation. Now there is a demand, as rightly Hemendra sir also mentioned in the beginning of this discussion, that demand is going to increase. It will continue to increase, and the quality demand also will continue to increase, because most of these food processing companies and technologies and all are evolving. So the need of quality produce and the quantity is going to increase. And in India, being the farmers there, most of the farmers are having small land holding size. The stress on the soil is very high, because if they have to derive more income from that soil with small land holding, it has to be more productive. Only then it will realize the actual benefit or the actual quantum of the benefit or to the full potential. And then once they get the good quality results from that at a full potential. Now for one example, like grains, if over fertilization is done, then it will lead to 70% of grain loss due to only fertilizer application. And second thing is, the salts are going to accumulate in the soil, due to which you require more water to convert that salt into a available manure to the roots of the plants. So now both are constrained. So now how do we target that? Now that is one question. And second thing is, now farmers have to spend more. If they are over fertilization, that means also they are spending more money on input, which is not necessary. And also it is leading to the yield deterioration. And third thing, it is also a threat, because farmers are on the verge of losing that entire land or a part of the land, wherein they will not be able to do farming anymore. So doubling farmers' income or increasing the farmers' income starts from soil. So it will start from that right application of fertilizer. So on that note, farmer has to get a easy and very affordable and also accessible solution, and it has to address their needs. And it has to be immediate. It cannot be something where farmer will try to learn technology, farmer will learn and then it will become mature. So those things and all are a long-term objective. So that is not going to happen, at least in near future. So in that direction, we built a system which will easily fit into this entire picture, which comes as a technology is fine, but as a solution, as a delivery thing, which will deliver this entire thing, where farmers should get easy access to get their soil testing done, get immediate interpretation of that, and based on that they can take their action. Now there are definitely huge challenge when it comes to adoption, as Kishore rightly mentioned. Now farmers are not used to this kind of thing, so there is a trust that has to be also built. And FPO is something where it will build all this, that bridge. FPO can become that bridge, and that is going to be a key component. And the way the FPO that we look at is, FPO is like a heart, and these technologies comes as a brain, and where this heart and brain comes together and completes that entire circle. It will pump that, that blood to this brain, and brain provides that all intelligence and all that required decision making capabilities, so that FPOs can deliver to the rest of the organs, which are all farmers. So this entire thing can make the whole body complete and make it as a healthy living being, which is earth. That is how we look at that. And on that note, now we have been working with some of the FPOs where we are doing where these FPOs are the result have been phenomenal, where we have established a rapid soil testing system, where farmer come there immediately without having any technology knowledge or anything. They just provide the soil sample there, get the soil testing in front of them happening, so that they can see that it is happening, and instantly there is a report also which is coming. Now what else has to be done to that? Now there has to be certain incentivization that has for this to adopt these things. Now today, if we talk about subsidy, so subsidy is being given blindly for every farmer, and there is no cap on that subsidy. So it is only, the cap is based on the land holding or something. So now the way it has to go in terms of policy making and all, it is like it has to be made, the limit of getting the credit for a farmer on purchasing, especially on the input, has to be on the basis of on the eligibility criteria, which is actually what is required by the soil. So the soil has a capacity to take, one is on the capacity to take certain amount of salts, which is fertilizer, and second thing is what crop requires. Now certain regions it is stressed also in terms of water. So fertilizer recommendation is not alone required for only for the crop, how much it is required, but also it is on the basis of how much water is available there, so that only that much is getting dissolved. So that that I think will continue to get integrated with such kind of linkages and all those things, which can make this entire thing and on a full potential, this can be realized in terms of benefits, where it can further increase on the yield, not only from the savings point of view on the input, but also by increasing the yield, and also continue to reduce the stress on the soil, and continue to have that more unit economics that comes on per acre or the land holding which is there. So that can increase the yield and also deliver that more benefits to the farmer.
This is brilliant, Sandeep, and your analogy of the short-term versus long-term calls that we make as farmers, why you need to preserve this land for the future generations, and also the analogy of the heart and brain and the entire body being this planet is very thought-provoking. We have to definitely look at these things as an integral part of our survival, rather than looking at this as initiatives. And I completely agree with you. We don't need to make farmers tech savvy. If we provide evidence of the interventions adding value to their income levels, the adoption will happen naturally. I'm completely with you. Thank you for that energetic introduction of your work and why soil testing is so important. Thanks again. So switching gears a little bit, because we have already utilized the bulk of our time allotted for this panel discussion, we will now go through a quick round of second round of questions, and we'll start with Hemendra. And if the panelists are brief for this round, we might have the bonus of having one more round. But let's see as the conversation moves. So Hemendra, how can we channel some of the funds towards creating sustainable infrastructure or in promoting innovations of startups to improve productivity and income levels of the farmers? What do you think?
Thanks, Anil. And yeah, I think it's been a very thought-provoking discussion so far. And for any innovation to scale, you need money. So I would say, look, there is already a lot of private capital flowing into the ecosystem, right? I don't think we are in a situation which we were in 2015 or 2010, when you had to hard sell agri-tech. I think it's for a change. We are seeing investors chasing good entrepreneurs. We are seeing broad basing of investor base. I think there is still one or two vacuum areas which we should address. I think one of them, I would say, and from a, let's say, even Karnataka perspective, where we have so many agri-tech headquartered. In fact, Bangalore is the agri-tech capital of the country. I think we should start building sources for catalytic capital. Right? When I say catalytic capital, I'm essentially talking capital in the range of, let's say, 10 lakhs to a crore, which is essentially needed for initial technical validation, proof of concept, go to market. I think that's where I see challenges. Of course, there are some incubators who are doing it, but given the depth in ecosystem, we need much more catalytic capital. In fact, I've been telling most of the states I'm talking to, just set up 100 crore high velocity fund about 100, 200 entrepreneurs in a state. 50% may fail, that's all right. But the 50% who's going to succeed will give you very good returns in fast tracking these innovations, because entrepreneurs struggle a lot in getting their first check. So I think that's one sort of area where we need to infuse more capital. Second is, of course, public-private partnership. That's essentially to create infrastructure. Like Kishore mentioned, there are a lot of warehouses and processing facilities available. How do we bring public sector and private sector together? And there's one example in Tamil Nadu where they have set up about 60 to 70 collection centers, and most of it is being utilized by FPUs and AgTechs, so which is very heartening, that there's such kind of initiatives happen. Third, last but not the least, low cost working capital. I think we need to figure that out. It's high time. We can't have agriculture farmers paying 30% per annum to informal sources. We can't make agriculture productive and remunerative if we bring that cost of capital to 10%, 5%. And that essentially means deepening of institutional credit. We need to completely change the way we do priority sector lending. And there are ways we can do it, because there's a lot of data and digitization which is happening, which wasn't available when PSL was started. So can we bring more data, more digitization, so that the cost of capital goes down for farmers? So I think these are three areas I want to highlight.
And Hemendra, just being with you, how do you think agri startups are enabling FPOs to add value at the farm gate in terms of sorting, grading, so on? What's your quick thought around it?
Oh, I think there are multiple ways. Of course, one is clearly the micro storage model, which Kishore has done, Arya Collateral has done, Amra Godam is doing. So I think there are 3 or 4 players which are like 1,000 to 2,000 tons, essentially catering to farmers, because a majority of warehousing in India, unfortunately, is for traders and processors. So I think this is one format which is a straightforward win-win. Farmer typically gets 30-40% more if he stores for 3 to 4 months. So that's one. Secondly, I would say there are startups, as I mentioned, Food and S4S Technologies, who are setting up micro-processing units at the farm gate, which is typically 5 to 10 lakh, and also ensuring that whatever is being processed here gets to the market. So it's not about setting up the facility, but making it sure that it goes to the market. And third is around cold storages, micro cold storages, like what Ecozen is doing, Promethean Power is doing for milk. There's a company in Odisha called Rucart, which is set up at 25,000 rupees cold storage, which increases shelf life by a few days and few weeks. So I think there are multiple examples where we have seen some intervention, and I'm sure there'll be many more to come.
Great. Yeah, Rucart is very impressive.
Yes.
It increases the shelf life by 4 or 5 days, which is good enough for the perishable vegetables to sustain. Great, thank you. So we'll move to Ashok. Ashok, how can we create a demand-driven thinking from supply-led thinking in agriculture? And how have the recent changes in the contract farming, in your view, be useful in increasing demand in agri value chain? What do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Anilji. I think the demand side, when we see, it's more the kind of demand we create at the farming system itself, like the input supplies and the demand for technology comes in there, and also the kind of value addition where the demand for investment comes there. That is from the farming, the kind of platforms production happens. And the other side is also the demand the produce creates among the industries and also the kind of consumer level. Both these aspects, as I really said in the earlier, like when you start addressing the agri value chain itself, the demand-driven approach comes into the ecosystem. Now the demand in terms of the DFI policies is I think the demand comes from the farming system to enhance the crop productivity. Like there are some income impact based parametric values which has been done, where initial 10 years up to 2013, there was a kind of trend of 66% enhancement in income. Whereas by 22, they want to reach a kind of income impact to 99%. And they identified 8 factors where these aspects could be addressed. The most important thing happened in terms of crop productivity. So demand is created. What should be done to enhance the productivity? Like few of the panels said about, like there's the enhancement from 17 to 24%. So the demand creation happens at the farming enterprise itself for the people who come in with technology or the input supplies. In fact, I've been telling in various forums, DFI should become DFTI, whereas doubling farm income, doubling even the technology persons who come in, make it sustainable, they should also get their income. In the value chain, the entire revenue sharing should happen. The other aspect, which is also on the livestock productivity, the demand also comes there, how we enhance the productivity of the livestock. Like every farm family has a livestock. Like a very good example we have done here is Akshay Kalpa, where the income enhanced by, in terms of like a farm family's income is 20,000-30,000. Now, the early birds who came into the entire value chain, we have 1.25 to 1.3 lakhs as their net income per month. So there is a demand created here. How the technology has come in, how the kind of intervention of the stakeholders have come in there. The other aspect which both the Krishi Tantra and the Ergo said it was on the kind of shift from the non-farm occupations. Like, can you create enterprises? Like the farming community starts owning a warehouse, start owning a micro enterprise. Now there is also a schematic offering by the micro enterprise setting up at the rural ecosystem itself. Now there is a demand created here where the entrepreneurship and the investment happens at the as a micro enterprise, which adds value to the produce and also creates warehouses, creates processing units. So actually it reflects on the demand side in the sense that consumers are more quality conscious and they also want fortified foods, nutrition elements put in at the farmer's hand itself. Like the demand, the customer delight is created where the demand for that particular produce and the shift will happen from the food crops to the nutrition-based horticulture produce. So this is where we are seeing the transition. And other aspect which the demand creation also happens is what's the crop selection you make, and can we address these into the agroclimatic zones and create demand by selecting few crops, focus crops in each area. Don't start having too many crops where the aggregation cannot happen, scaling can happen at all. So that's the area where we can't have a one homogeneous solution for a heterogeneous ecosystem. Like take Karnataka has 10 agroclimatic zones. Like each zone should have a customized, focus crop approach. One other thing you also said about the contract farming, there's a new, I think it's a very revolutionary thing, and there is a kind of model format of the entire contract farming, documentation to be created. One very impressive aspect here is it ensures the entire decision making of the farmer. Like it's a pre-production contract done. Now, he is confident that he grows this crop, like I said about the focus crop. If he decides on these focus crops, he is assured of a particular price after a time. Like we can see a clear example, like Clover Ventures in Bangalore. They have started talking to the FPOs and individual farming communities. They established the entire ecosystem for him. If it is greenhousing, yes. If it is an irrigation system, yes. If it is seed supplies, yes. Everything is created with them on a kind of contractual agreement. After the produce is done, they will pick it up at a market rate or a predetermined rate. The farmer has a choice. This is a real contract farming in reality, even before the act came. I think they're setting some very good examples, and scaling is possible in contract farming because individual farmer can't invest and gather things, whereas the contract farming accumulates the thing and farmers own it. And they get the investor attraction to come in and give the kind of very limited resources he has, and then puts it in the hands of the contractual, like the person who is benefiting after it comes in. And there's also a rider that they can't own assets over there. They can't build assets unless the farmer agrees. Like first 5 years he does on the things, and then if he has a contractual agreement beyond 5 years, and he takes the concurrence of the owner of the farm and then establishes the infrastructure there. And the built asset is left to the farmer. That means he has an accelerated platform to continue his farming. I think these are the beautiful things coming in, and there is a kind of enforceable authority which is going to come to enforce this contract farming authority. And if that comes in and enforcement happens and implementation is taken care, and farmers is a huge beneficiary. I think these are the words I wanted to just share with you.
Great. So, Ashok, before I let you go, very quick question and a 1 minute answer. Because Sandeep mentioned about preserving the land for future generations. What do you think of climate smart agriculture and sustainable, practices in agriculture in relation to the doubling of farmers' income? Because both are important, but not in the urgent bucket at this point in time. So just very quick input from you.
Thank you for that. I think Kondoji put it in a very nice way that do we give these resources in the same form or enhanced form to the next generation? I think farmer has to be given an awareness of this, not to waste. Like the wastages of the produce is beyond 40% by any statistics, and is much more in the country here. So wastage recycling is one thing. Preserving the natural resource of water and soil is one of the other. Climate impact has to be contained. The huge scientific approaches are in the place. Another aspect, again, I get back to the livestock farming. It's proven now that livestock farming emits huge carbon dioxide, and there are remedial measures for this. And I think it's a matter of awareness we have to spread across and give the toxic-free produce to the community, which is, I think, it's a customer delight again, if I have to put. And these are the aspects. I think I answered your point.
Thank you, Ashok. So moving to Kishore. Kishore, do you foresee each of the FPOs having these small warehouses, and then we aggregate all these small warehouses using technology as an aggregated platform? And the second point is, now that the warehouses are going to be at the farm gate with the FPOs, do you also see the role for primary processing at the FPO level? What are your thoughts?
Giving again the opportunity to share my learnings, and see what I have learned, that there are lots of hand-holding, lots of operational challenges need to be standardized. Then only any institution, be it a startup or be it a FPO, can actually scale this model and make it profitable or viable at least. I'm definitely very positive to see the FPO is learning the operational challenges. Even we are very closely working with the WDRA and the central government to make smoother policies and the registration process of the warehouses on WDRA, so that each warehouse which can belong to maybe the FPO or an corporate can be registered on WDRA, and that warehouse can issue a ENW, electronic negotiable warehouse receipt, so that the technology can really play a great role to connect financial institution to give them a loan directly to the farmers, Also, the end buyer can buy their small quantity grain across the geography. Electronically aggregation would be possible. These all things are only possible if we work at ground zero to give a lots of hand holding, lots of training and development. And also maybe possible that Appio may not be able to initially develop all the expertise in terms of the market linkage, the finance, the storage. So initial, I think, couple of years, 5-10 years, they may require lots of support from a startup like us. But down the line, if I'm talking about 140,000, 140 million farmers or 130 million farmers, maybe that's the scope, that's the scale where we are looking for, that Appios will be coming forward and setting up these kind of infrastructure and learning the process and using the technology platform. So I'm very sure that Appio definitely will evolve and think about that how to make their establishment viable so that they can exist at least, and technology can definitely play a great role.
Thank you, Kishore. That's absolutely right. I completely agree with you. Yeah. So Sandeep, do you have any examples that you would like to share? I know your journey has just started, but for the benefit of the viewers, can you please share some examples of how your technology has helped the farmers and the FPOs to avoid wastages and increase productivity? And the second question to you, Sandeep, is will incentivizing farmers for tech adoption going to increase the farmers' income? What do you think?
One is one of the we have done. I mean, we have about now 40 FPOs that have bought in our system, but productivity and all those things are still a long-term case study that are yet to be established on in terms of, because of balanced fertilizer utilization, how it has impacted on the thing. But definitely the immediate saving that has happened, at least on the ground, where a kind of like urea been about some 500 farmer data set that we are having. So this NPK fertilizer, what they were using, so there has been a substantial reduction in terms of usage of fertilizer due to the recommended package of practice from the university that has been delivered based on the soil test report that we have provided. That varies from about 18% and goes up to 30%, which is a huge benefit in terms of immediate returns. At least the cost of the soil testing is recovered then and there. So that is the first this one. And of course, there is a little bit of more saving. But the idea here is not to reduce the price, not to save the cost of input. So it is to basically get the right amount of fertilizer to get onto the soil. So that is the whole objective. And because in India, it is predominantly, NPK, like your SSP, urea, and all those things are being used in a higher quantity. And micronutrients are not used elsewhere, that are not used predominantly in India. So wherever there is an application of a major nutrient, then definitely you see an immediate savings that are happening across. So that is one aspect of it. And now we have to see now how it will result in better yield and all those things. And it will also give evidence on, where it will also increase the biomass, like increasing the organic carbon in the soil, and also improve the microbial activity in the soil. So those and all things will continue to happen, which will be a continuous process. So that is a kind of benefit that we are able to establish. And now incentivizing farmer. So incentivizing can, multiple ways. It can one is like subsidizing. So now today all these fertilizers are getting subsidized. But when it goes to technology, if they want to avail any technology services from any third party, it is still attracting like GST 18%. So when government is giving free fertilizer, then what is the problem of giving technology services which will actually improve the thing? So the whole objective of giving subsidy is to improve the livelihood of the farmer and to make it more easier on the operational level to the farmer. So the technology aspect is still it is still not this thing. So I think that incentivizing, like reducing that or waiving off that kind of GST. So those kind of things will definitely motivate or reduce the technology costs, at least for the farmer while we are delivering. So that is one aspect, and of course there has to be something where farmers will also have to be identified for their technology acceptability or adoption on the ground. So if that kind of incentivization happens for those farmers who are adopting technology, then, and also recognizing them and rewarding them on that, so other farmers will also get motivated to adopt the technology. So here the concept of incentivization is not to basically incentivize, but to promote technology adoption in the agriculture space. So that I think I will leave it with that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So on that note, while there is so much to share, so much to do, but we have as much time, we will conclude the discussion here. I would like to take this opportunity to thank each one of you for not only your time, but also sharing your experiences. And the experiences are coming from your hard work that is going in the field in making lives for our Annadatas, farmers, better. So may the Almighty give all of us more power and more intuition to do what is meaningful and work towards doubling the farmers' income. And again, thanks to the Bangalore Tech Summit 2020 for having this wonderful topic as a discussion for the panel, and also to the audience who are going to register for it. And we all have a responsibility to discharge towards the Annadata for us. Again, Karnataka State is taking this initiative, leading from the front, and I'm reminded of Dr. Rajkumar's song where he says, "Huttidare Kannada Nadale Huttalebeku." Okay, so on that note, if we are able to make all our farmers say and demonstrate that in this wonderful state of Karnataka, saying each farmer who is born in Karnataka is rejoicing the fact, and then inspire the other farmers who are part of this wonderful country that we belong to, and we are privileged to be born here. So may God give us the ability to make a difference and live as the universal family. Thank you very much on that note, and all the very best. Thank you.